and welcome back to Campus Conversations, brought to you by the Alabama Independent School Association. I'm your host, Michael Shipma. I serve as the Marketing and Communications Director here at the AISA. In this series, we dive into what it means to be a part of the association, including with interviews with experts in academics, accreditation, and athletics, all so that we can share those insights with our more than 90 member schools and counting and the 28,000 students that they serve. Every Friday, join us for new episodes featuring engaging and helpful discussions designed to help students, teachers, and administrators be the best that they can be. And this week's topic is the CHOOSE Act. It's here, folks, and schools can already start applying to participate in this program. We believe this is an exciting opportunity for independent schools, especially for the students our members currently serve and will serve in the coming years. This episode contains lots of valuable information, I believe, that will be beneficial to both schools and parents. This is Campus Conversations. The CHOOSE Act. It's a historic investment in education here in Alabama and one that has us at the AISA incredibly excited. If you don't already know, the CHOOSE Act was signed into law earlier in 2024, and it essentially creates education savings accounts that eligible families can use to pay all sorts of education-related costs. But as you might imagine, the new law and this new funding comes with a set of rules and regulations that both parents and schools must be aware of in order to benefit from this. That's why the AISA hosted a webinar with heads of our member schools to go over these rules and answer some of the questions that you all might have had about the CHOOSE Act, what it means for your school, what it means for your parents. And joining us now to talk more about that webinar, the CHOOSE Act, and where everything just stands right now are Michael McLendon, Executive Director of the AISA, and Caleb Smith, our Director of Member Services. So thank you both, gentlemen, for being here with us and for taking the time for this podcast.
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it feels like there's a lot to know here, and there is, but it's also, I believe, a pretty straightforward process here for both schools and member families. And like I said, we just wrapped up a webinar yesterday as of this recording, and with heads of school from across the state. And I guess, Michael, let's start with you. What was probably one of the biggest questions or maybe concerns that you felt like came out of that entire discussion that we had with the heads of school? We also had Class Wallet with us, and then also the Department of Revenue was on that call as well.
I don't know if one particular thing stands out. I mean, I think the one that probably drew the most question, really was kind of centered around the criteria for who is approved in the first year, second year, and beyond. I think, I think that, which is really kind of the core of the program. And I think that's where a lot of the questions were centered on.
And so I guess when you kind of look at these rules, like I said, it seems like there's a lot to know, but when you look at the eligibility, especially for this first year, because there's going to be over the course of 3 years is how this whole
Right.
thing is going to get rolled out. So kind of walk us through just kind of the real basics, we'll start out with kind of, 30,000 foot overview of how much money is going to families, what form that money is going to be available to families,
Right.
and who gets it first, I guess.
Right. So first of all, this is funded at a minimum of $100 million. So we're in the first year in the 25-26 school year, we're looking at $100 million total. And the criteria for that will roll out kind of be phased in over 3 years. So those first 2 years are really very similar. And there's different requirements that families can be eligible for. The ESA, which is $7,000 per student, right? So the first criteria, which is probably drew some of the greatest questions, centered around special needs, because the first 500 tax credits are awarded to special needs students, which that's not going to hinder others from applying. They're going to set that money aside, so that's not really going to stop anyone else that meets the criteria from applying. But the biggest question that came out of that yesterday from the webinar is whether or not the poverty level was also attached to the special needs students. I think there was a lot of question as to whether it was or wasn't. So we're really kind of waiting on clarification there. But we do know that there are 500 ESA set aside for special needs students. We know that dependents of full active duty military personnel that are zoned to attend a priority school or attending a priority school, which priority that was formerly known as failing schools for those not familiar with the new terminology there that was adopted. So that is the second criteria. And then we have the 300% of poverty level. That is really kind of the third criteria within those first couple of years. And in that third year, we reach what's referred to as universal, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in our conversation, I think, because that's another question that I get a lot.
Mhm. And as you look to the future here, like I said, this is all going to be rolled out over the course of the next few years. And so that means that the vast majority of parents that are listening to this or that are looking at this whole thing unfold, you're not going to really be able to do a whole lot about this for another couple years at least. Right now, it's the schools, it seems,
Yeah.
that really need to be kind of figuring out what exactly they're going to be doing as far as handling this and implementing this and working with families who are going to be eligible. And like you said, the first 500 as well. So when you look at this whole process, what do schools need to be doing right now as of middle of October 2024? What do our member schools need to be looking at right now?
Schools right now really need to be consuming as much information as possible. They need to be participating in the webinars we host. They need to be participating in the webinars hosted by Class Wallet and Department of Revenue, and we'll show you some of those later on how you can find out when and where those are. But really consuming information and having conversations with your administration, your board, to determine your participation and really just having a understanding of what this is all about. It's just to back up a little bit. We're in a proposed rules process right now, right? So these rules were released on, I think it was September 30th when the draft rules were released, and we are in a period of public comment right now. So these aren't official. We have a draft rules, but these won't be official until November 5th. So we still have a couple more weeks to review the rules and submit comments if we have questions, and we will be submitting some, but we're still in that process. But schools can go ahead and sign up. That is something that schools can go ahead and do they can visit chooseact.alabama.gov and sign up. It's a pretty simple process. And then parents will be able to sign up beginning January 5th at 7 a.m.
Mhm. And that website, by the way, we will have that linked in the description down below. You can also find that link to that website to apply. If you go to aisaonline.org, our website, you'll see on the homepage, Choose Act right there at the top. Click on that. There's a lot of great information. Really, a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about right now is there. A lot of helpful links, not just to that website, but also to these recent draft guidelines that were released. And as you mentioned, Michael, these will get finalized on November the 5th of 2024.
Right.
So please, I would say, this is one of the things that we've kind of been talking about as we, move forward through this whole process kind of together is, we're all looking at these guidelines at this new website. And we just really want to encourage people to take the time to really read it, like you said, Michael, consume it as much as you possibly can to really just get ahead of the game as best as you possibly can. Because a lot of the questions that we've been getting have been ones that I hope could be answered by looking through some of the guidelines, and there is quite a bit there to know. But we really hope that having these conversations can really help and serve our members the best way possible. So. Um, Caleb, I wanted to hear from you. Kind of had you on the sidelines here for just a second, but perhaps what was some of your takeaways from some of our discussions yesterday before we kind of move on through more of this these draft guidelines?
Yeah, kind of answers to both the questions that Michael's already answered, but something that stuck out to me yesterday were some of the questions that were asked were how this information was going to be how this information was going to get to the parents. And so I think it's something we should note that the Department of Revenue has partnered with a marketing firm, so there will be a marketing effort across the state to get this information. I mean, there's the websites, there are the PDF documents, there are guidelines. I mean, there's a ton of information out there. But then one of the things that I think the schools should be really focused on, especially if they're highly considering utilizing this program, um, is figuring out the best way that they can communicate with their parents. They're going to have to work hand in hand with their parents, and whether that's Zoom calls with the parents, whether that's hosting an on-campus workshop,
Yeah.
um, really starting to look at how you can best serve your parents. And the AISA is here to help you gather that information. And will be more than happy to send you everything that we have. But yeah, I definitely think the schools need to be looking forward to January 5th and on, and how can they best serve their parents by being prepared to help them apply for this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, as we kind of move through all this as well, I guess one of the questions that we kind of got as we were, going through all of this yesterday is, the actual funding itself. I mean, we hear the $7,000 figure thrown around a lot. Uh, let's just be really clear. What form is that going to be in before we move on any further?
Right.
What form is that going to be in? Uh, I mean, because we've had a lot of questions. Is this a
Yeah.
check that goes to the families? Who gets this money? Where is it? How does it pay for education related expenses? We just want to be super duper clear with all of this. So how would you best explain it
Yeah.
in your own words?
So it's really pretty simple. I know it may seem complicated, but it's really not. So the Department of Revenue has contracted with a company called Class Wallet, and Class Wallet is really what it sounds like. I mean, that's the Class Wallet will manage the program, but that is where the funds will be. Just that is Class Wallet will be who actually holds the education savings account for each family. Each family will have an account through Class Wallet, and the Department of Revenue will deposit the $7,000 into their Class Wallet account. And the parent will be responsible for receiving invoices from the school, uploading those invoices, and Class Wallet will distribute the money to the school accordingly for the approved expenses. So it's if you really think of it, like it sounds, Class Wallet is going to be like the bank account. The parent won't handle any money, they won't touch any money, and Class Wallet will be the organization that distributes and really monitors the process as we go.
Mhm. And one of the questions we got a lot yesterday was, when will that money become available to the parents? Because our schools are also looking at this and thinking, okay, so how do we plan out when we
Yeah,
are going to charge for these services that we're providing,
yeah.
and trying to figure out what that schedule will look like. What's probably your best advice as it pertains to that?
So I think, and Caleb can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I believe they said that the funds will be available in the accounts beginning July 1. And
Yes,
it'll
I think that
be,
was
it'll
correct.
be, they're not going to, it's not going to be a slow drip into the account of the funds. There will be $7,000 will be put into the account in July. And it's up to how the invoicing process, however the school works that, however that works out on how the money's distributed.
And, and I think that goes back to that question earlier. What should schools be doing is kind of
Yeah,
looking at that process of how do they want to invoice these students, and do they want to
right,
do quarterly? Do they want to do it, you know, monthly even? I mean, I
right.
guess it's really up to them as of what we know right now.
No, yeah. I mean, I had a question this morning. It was from a school of regarding textbook fees, and they said, well, we really don't know what our textbook fee is until August. Well, I mean, there's no, you don't. In fact, I would probably wait until that time before I submitted an invoice to the family for those fees. You wouldn't want to you wouldn't want to guess, or you can't guess, but you wouldn't want to do that in July. There's just no need to rush that.
Mhm. And to be clear, any expenses that the families incur over the course of the year that go above and beyond what is allocated in their ESA that family
Yeah.
will be responsible for.
Yeah.
And that's a very important point that I want to make sure we get across. And one of the things we tried to communicate to our member schools through our webinar was uh, to just really communicate, perhaps towing the line of over communicating about what exactly these parents are going to be responsible for
Yeah.
financially.
Yeah.
Because, we all know, I mean, being able budgeting for all of these expenses that go into education can be there's a lot that goes into it. There's no doubt about that. And so I guess real quick, kind of moving from that point, I wanted to kind of quickly go through just maybe some of the qualifying educational expenses is the term that
Mhm.
the Department of Revenue uses. What are some of the things that are on there? Again, just kind of a little bit of a 30,000 foot view here. What are some of the things that are on there? What are some of the things that are not on there? And maybe what you think, Michael, that could potentially trip up families and perhaps schools as well that if they don't read about it, know about it now, could
Yeah.
trip them up in the future.
Yeah. So as far as what's on there, what's allowable, tuition and fees, but not all fees. It's really kind of narrowed down to activity fees, administration fees, enrollment fees, programming fees, security fees, and obviously tuition, technology fees. Things that are not allowed on there that are probably, our parents need to be most aware of are athletic fees, field trip fees, lunch, insurance, late fees, uniforms. That's been a big question as well. Graduation fees like cap and gown fees, anything along those lines. Textbooks are permitted. There is a list. It's pretty, we won't really go into it, but it pretty much covers everything that our schools would participate in. There's probably some textbooks that may not be permitted in certain subjects, but we won't
Mhm,
really, get into that. Curriculum and reading material fees are permitted. Instructional materials are permitted. Private tutoring is permitted. Now there are some qualifiers for that. The private tutor has to be a degreed professional, and there's a little bit more to it than, you know, Johnny down the street's going to tutor me in math.
mhm,
Isn't so much going to be permitted, but computers, technology aids, therapy for
mhm,
say dyslexia, speech therapy, physical therapy. It's pretty broad. I think it's fairly safe to say that the $7,000 ESA will there's not going to be much left over for the average student, an average
mhm.
family out there once tuition and fees are paid.
And to be clear here, even even if a family has an eligible student, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that the school that they're going to, or perhaps the school that they would like to go to, will participate in the program. However,
Yeah,
we do anticipate uh,
yeah,
that the vast majority, at least of our member schools among the AISA, will participate. We have that general expectation, but
right,
there's nothing that says that these schools have to participate in this.
right.
Uh,
Yeah, that'll be the first thing that parents
yeah.
need to check in conversation is, whether or not your school is participating or the school you would like to pretend is participating. And that information will be held on the um, Department of Revenue website and probably the Class Wallet site as well.
Mhm.
And
And
correct me if I'm wrong, but sorry, Michael. Correct me if I'm wrong, but even if your school is not participating and you are an eligible student, and you can receive $2,000. You're
That's
you're
another question, Caleb. I'm glad you
oh,
brought that
okay.
up. So that's another thing is some of the way in some of the rules or some of the interpretation of the rules that are written is that money is reserved for homeschool students. So it was initially thought that it applied to anyone whose school was not participating. So that is one of the questions that we have for the Department of Revenue, some clarification on that um, is a point. But I'm glad you brought that up because that is one of the lingering questions out there for that we need to have answered.
mhm. One other thing I wanted to touch on real briefly was a question that came up in our webinar yesterday, which is how does facts factor into all of this? This is one of the questions that we got yesterday, but then also just through talking with member schools throughout the state.
Yeah.
What is that integration process going to look like, if there even is one? And then also, is there any sort of advantage to having facts already in place at some of these schools? What is that going to look like?
I haven't got a great answer on this. I think that there will be there has to be some advantage to the schools that already have facts, just from a software standpoint, just from a, um, uh, technology integration standpoint. There has to be some advantage. But that being said, it's not required that your school have facts in order to participate. So, but I've got to think that, there's going to be some advantage. Many of our schools use facts, so I think they will, there's got to be some advantage to it.
Mhm. And just from both of you, you guys just both just jump in here. I really want to hear what you guys have to say about. I'm looking at page 12 of the draft requirements for education service providers here, and there's there's a few things here that I feel like are really basic, cut and dry, as you would expect. Is there anything perhaps that jumps out as far as what documentation or reports? Was there anything that you feel like might trip up schools or might be unexpected for them as they go through this application process?
I don't think so in the application process. I mean, they are looking for some level of financial stability and security in the institution. So, you have the requirement of that, of proving your through your financial statements that the school is stable. And then there's the option of surety bond as well, which we are working, trying to get more information on that for schools that want to go that route. I did have a conversation with a school that is very financially stable, but they thought that they would prefer that route, just to eliminate any question or concern or need to submit financial documents. There's also some question about schools that are under the church's finances. And so, it's you're a budget line item in a church, and, you know, it's a different financial situation. So a group like that may choose surety bond over the financial statement process.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
And I believe
Yeah.
so. And again, I really don't think we can emphasize this enough that if you can read through these documents, I mean, what we're looking at and what we're reading
Yeah.
and trying to understand. It's public, there none of this is hidden really. There's plenty of avenues to go and read through this, and
Yeah.
hopefully just by talking about it and getting it out in front of people, our goal is to really make sure that people feel as comfortable as they possibly can, and especially as we get up to this November 5th finalization date. So let's talk about that real quick. What do you feel like, Michael, that our member schools, our families need to know as far as that November 5th date? Because that is a pretty big one throughout this whole
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. So, I mean, we already have information compiled to submit, with questions or proposed revisions to the rules. Nothing major, just some wording or clarifications, primarily ours. We encourage our members to um, send us their suggestions. We'll, that way we can submit them as a group, and other groups are doing this as well. We're part of other coalitions of we've already had several meetings on these rules with other groups that have had questions and concerns, and they'll be submitting information along with us too. So, I mean, I would encourage, our member schools to read through the rules, and if you have some commentary on it, send them our way. We'll include it, and of course, schools it tells you in the rules how to submit your own. If you would like to submit them directly, it's certainly an option as well.
Mhm. One of the things I like about this new website through Class Wallet is that it's really just straightforward as far as, if you're a parent, here's
Yeah.
information that you need to know. If you're an education service provider, here's what you need to know. And,
Yep.
of course, with whatever changes take place, if there are any changes after November 5th, we'll, of course, make sure to get that out in front of people as much as we possibly can with future webinars, things such as this podcast, information on our website, really just so that way people are as prepared as we can. And I guess, you know, I know we've been talking a lot about, nitty gritty details and things like that. But I really want to hear from we'll start with you, Caleb, and then we'll get to Michael. But what's the feeling right now as we kind of venture into all of this together? I mean, we're kind of all jumping into this, and but there's a lot of excitement, I feel like, too, kind of underneath all of the questions. What are y'all feeling right now?
I mean, I would cautious excitement. I don't know if that's the best word, but I mean, yeah, there's excitement around this program, and I mean, there's no doubt that it could definitely make an impact on the education in the state. But the caution comes in from the school side of things. Like we don't have the final rules yet, so like we need to see what that looks like. We need to really look at the schools need to look at their mission and their values, and if this program can align with that, and talk to
Mhm.
the board and talk to stakeholders. So I think that's where the caution comes in. Is we're kind of waiting on the final rules to see how everything plays out. But there's no doubt that this could be extremely beneficial to a lot of students and families um, in Alabama.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Michael, from the standpoint of independent schools across the state, I mean, where do you see what do you see this doing just for the whole entire landscape, just across the entire state?
Wow. I mean, I think all the things Caleb just said, I do think we will see, and we've already seen some evidence of it. I think we will see some interest from individuals and groups in starting schools in the states, probably in underserved areas. I think that is something that we will see a significant amount of over the next 5 years, particularly. I think we'll probably see it in year one. I think over the next 12 months, we're going to see some of that. Um, one of the hurdles to starting a school has always been finance, right? People just didn't have money to start a school. And a program like this eases some of that stress. You still need some money you need a facility, you need some infrastructure, you need some money to get started. But knowing that you've got some financial support, particularly in areas that, are high poverty, where there's, individuals may not have access to a lot of funds, it will, it could shake up the landscape. A little bit in a good way. We could see a lot. The downside is that you're the private school world, we'll call it, is not in the shadows anymore. If we ever were from a legislative standpoint, and you know that's going to create some potentially more legislative oversight attempts of private schools, or just for this program on a funding mechanism standpoint, it's funded at $100 million minimally. $100 million is not going to cover that third year universal piece that we're shooting for. So there will be, funding will come into play, and all of that. And
Mhm.
and that's I mean, that's really kind of where the association work comes into play. Schools get to worry about their missions, they get to worry about their admissions policies and their student policies, and how they're going to serve students, and we get to worry about everything behind the scenes. So that's what makes this relationship and partnership great with associations. And I think we'll see continued growth in the association because of that. I mean, we've already seen. I mean, we've already had some growth that I would say is a result of Choose Act.
Mhm.
And with that, we'll continue to see that. So 92 members now and just over 28,000 students. And I would guess that by this time next year, we'll have 100 members and, 29, 30,000 students.
Mhm. And I will quickly point out that through all of this, even with our participating schools, beyond obviously just the basic state requirements, regulations, documentation, that sort of thing, uh, the schools that do participate in this are going to be able to maintain their independence as it pertains to,
Yeah.
day-to-day operations, their school mission. So that's something I want to make sure that we just real quickly point out, which I think is going to be really encouraging for a lot of schools to hear and a
Yeah.
lot of families as well. So, I mean, barring any other, glaring questions that you feel like we haven't already addressed, I want to give you all a second to think about that. But I mean, I really feel like, again, cannot stress it enough. Take the time, look through these guidelines, try and keep up to date with what's going on. Definitely keep an eye on that November 5th deadline for when these rules will be finalized, and we'll all kind of get through this together.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, we talked about that. I mean, the rules are 18 pages, but there's probably 8 pages of actual content if you read it. So it's like reading a child's picture book. There's pictures on every other page. Not literal pictures in the rules, but there's a lot of dead space. If you were to narrow it down, it's not even the Choose Act itself. If you want to kind of compare the original law and the rules to see where they pull the rules from. Not a lot of information. And I mean, I can't stress enough the resource of the website, the chooseact.alabama.gov. Tremendous resource. There's a great parent guide on there that's really good for schools as well to kind of read through. They have webinars listed on there that you can sign up for, parent and school webinars. So I mean, I just can't stress it enough of what a resource it is.
mhm. Well, gentlemen, Caleb Smith, Director of Member Services, Michael McLendon, our Executive Director here at AISA. Thanks to both of you for taking some time away from what you both individually have going on. We're all really busy these days. You don't need me to tell you that, but thank you so much. And again, we'll get this information, that website that Michael just talked about, some contact information for how schools can reach the AISA with perhaps any
Yeah.
ideas or questions they might have. And we'll do our best to communicate as best we can with everyone involved. So again, thank you to both of you for being on the podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you.
As we navigate through the implementation of the Choose Act, we strongly encourage all of our member schools to take a proactive approach to staying up to date with the latest information. To do that, head over to the Choose Act page on the AISA website. There's also the newly published Choose Act website from ClassWallet. Both of those pages are down below in the episode description. You can find those links there. Plus, if you're one of our member schools and would like to provide your thoughts or input on the proposed guidelines, please reach out to our office. But for now, that'll do it for this week's episode of Campus Conversations. I'm your host, Michael Shipma. Thank you for listening.